What happens when one of the strongest and most disciplined men in the world enters a gym? Anonymously and gets challenged by someone who underestimates him. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has always been synonymous with strength, determination, and discipline, but that afternoon he just wanted a quiet workout. He walked into a random gym. No fanfare, no cameras, just a regular guy looking for exercise. What he didn't expect was that an arrogant personal trainer would see him as the perfect target for his provocations. The trainer only saw a big guy and thought he could humiliate him. He thought wrong. What happened next was a true spectacle of humility, strength, and respect, something no one in that gym would ever forget. Stay until the end to find out how The Rock responded without a single rude word. If you believe humility and respect matter more than ego, leave a like. Comment on which part impacted you the most. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Now, sit back and get ready for a story full of tension, twists, and an unforgettable lesson. The gym was at its peak activity. The sound of weights crashing onto the floor echoed through the space, blending with the hum of treadmills and the constant buzz of conversations between gym-goers. The metallic scent of iron mixed with sweat was unmistakable, and the atmosphere pulsed with the intense energy of training. Inside, no one wanted to be just another face in the crowd. Every person working out seemed to be competing, even if silently, to be the strongest, the fastest, the most imposing. In this world of bodybuilders, athletes, and fitness enthusiasts, proving physical superiority was part of the routine. Amid it all, Ryan stood out. He wasn't just a personal trainer. He was a known figure. His sculpted physique looked almost like armor, and his presence was noticed by everyone. Always surrounded by students and admirers, he made sure to establish himself as a reference in that gym. He didn't just teach, he performed. He enjoyed being the center of attention. He liked feeling that this was his territory. That's why when the gym doors opened and a tall, muscular man walked in quietly, Ryan noticed immediately. At first, he didn't think much of it. The guy seemed out of place in the environment. He wore a black hoodie and loose workout pants, contrasting with the others, who wore tight-fitting clothes to show off their muscles. Instead of walking to the gym's center, where the heavyweights were, the man headed to a more isolated corner and began his warm-up. Something felt off. Ryan narrowed his eyes, trying to get a better look. The stranger had an impressive physique, but he wasn't trying to show it off. Then, as he slightly turned to adjust the weights, Ryan finally recognized his face. It was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The shock was immediate, but it wasn't admiration that Ryan felt. It was something else. Jealousy. Here stood one of the most famous and respected men in the world of action and fitness, a true legend. And yet, he was acting like just another guy. No security, no cameras, no fuss, just a man training. Ryan couldn't accept that. This was his territory. If The Rock was going to train there, he needed to know that he wasn't special. The need to assert himself flared up inside Ryan like a fire. He had to do something. He had to show everyone that the real leader of that gym was still him. Ryan crossed his arms and kept his gaze fixed on The Rock, studying his movements. The actor warmed up calmly, stretching his muscles with precision. Every movement was natural, with no exaggeration, no performance. Ryan didn't see it as confidence. He saw it as weakness. In his mind, if The Rock was as strong as people claimed, he shouldn't be wasting time with simple stretches and warm-ups. The personal trainer decided to act. Ryan crossed his arms and kept his gaze fixed on The Rock, studying his movements. The actor warmed up calmly, stretching his muscles with precision. Every movement was natural, with no exaggeration, no performance. Ryan didn't see it as confidence. He saw it as weakness. In his mind, if The Rock was as strong as people claimed, he shouldn't be wasting time with simple stretches and warm-ups. The personal trainer decided to act. That irritated Ryan. He didn't like being ignored. If The Rock wasn't going to react, he would push harder. Ryan stepped closer, his smile filled with malice. He wanted to force a response. Now, he started mocking The Rock's size. He implied that having big muscles didn't mean knowing how to train. This time, The Rock made a subtle pause. It was almost imperceptible, but Ryan noticed. For a brief moment, the actor took a deep breath, rolled his shoulders slightly, and moved his neck from side to side, dissipating tension. But then, he went right back to training as if nothing had happened. Ryan's smile wavered. He didn't expect that. He wanted the rock to respond. He wanted to be challenged. But he was completely ignored. That frustrated him even more. The need to prove himself grew stronger. Ryan knew he had to go further. Without hesitation, he walked over to a rack of dumbbells and grabbed a moderate weight, making a show of spinning it in his hands as if testing how light it was. The gym-goers started noticing what was happening. All eyes turned to the scene. Tension filled the air. With a relaxed posture, Ryan extended the dumbbell toward the rock as if offering him some help. The gesture wasn't friendly. It was a challenge. A silent way of saying that the rock should start slow, like a beginner. Silence grew. Some gym members exchanged glances, realizing that Ryan was crossing the line. Others, however, watched with anticipation. This was the kind of confrontation they didn't want to miss. Until now, the rock had done nothing. But now, it was different. The rock stopped for a moment. It was a brief instant, but it was enough to make the entire gym hold its breath. It was as if he had made a decision. But instead of confronting Ryan, instead of reacting with words, he simply turned and walked toward the weight rack. His steps were slow, controlled. There was no rush. He knew exactly what he was about to do. Ryan's confident smile started to falter. He expected a verbal response. He expected the rock to justify himself. But instead, the actor acted. Without hesitation, he bent down and picked up the heaviest dumbbells on the rack. The impact was immediate. The weights the rock chose weren't for just anyone. They were the ones only the strongest in the gym used for their main lifts. And yet, he held them with ease. The entire gym held its breath. The people who had laughed before were now silent. Even Ryan, who had been so confident, watched without a word. The rock held the weights, got into position, and began his set. And that's when everything changed. Every repetition was executed with absolute perfection. The movement was precise, fluid, effortless. The workout wasn't exaggerated, it was natural. It was the execution of a man who wasn't there to show off. He was there because he lived this. Ryan realized he had made a mistake, but he wasn't ready to back down. He needed to regain control, and that's when he decided to issue a new challenge. The personal trainer Ryan felt in control of the situation. He thrived on the gazes around him, the subtle laughter, and the growing anticipation in the gym. He wanted a spectacle. He wanted everyone to see that he was the true king of that place. With an air of superiority, Ryan picked up a pair of moderately heavy dumbbells and lightly spun them in his hands, as if evaluating how heavy they were. His posture was relaxed, almost like that of a teacher about to give a lesson to a clumsy student. Without hesitation, he pushed one of the dumbbells forward, offering it to the rock with an expression full of sarcasm. It was a direct provocation, a challenge disguised as help. He wanted the actor to take that weight, to accept his suggestion so he could humiliate him even more. The laughter around them grew. Some gym-goers watched the scene with curiosity, while others exchanged glances, aware that Ryan was playing with fire. The rock paused for a moment. The pause was subtle but noticeable. His body remained still for a second longer than necessary, as if he were considering his options. He could have reacted. He could have raised his voice, confronted Ryan directly, and put the trainer in his place with just a few words. But he did none of that. The decision was silent. With firm, calm steps, he simply walked to the weight rack, completely ignoring the provocation. His movements were slow but not hesitant. He knew exactly what he was doing. The smile on Ryan's face faltered slightly. He expected a response, a comment, a look, anything that would give him the chance to continue his game. But instead, he was ignored. That bothered him. And then something happened that no one expected. The rock bent down and picked up the heaviest dumbbells from the rack. The gym, which had been filled with conversations and noise, started to fall into an unusual silence. The weights. The rock chose were not what an ordinary person would pick for a warm-up. They were the weights that only the strongest in the gym dared to use in their main workouts. And yet he held them effortlessly, as if they were mere accessories. The people around him began to notice what was happening. One by one, the gym-goers who had been focused on their own workouts now turned their attention, curious to see how this would end. And then, he began. Each repetition was executed with absolute precision. His arms moved fluidly. His breathing was controlled. There were no tremors, no hesitation, no signs of exaggerated effort. It was perfection. His muscles contracted at the exact moment, demonstrating not just strength but total control over every movement. The impact was immediate. Ryan, who had once worn a confident smile, now watched in silence. His expression began to change as he realized something was wrong. He had expected the rock to struggle, to grimace, to show some sign of fatigue, but that didn't happen. Instead of what Ryan had planned, the rock was completely focused on his workout as if no one else was there. The personal trainer uncrossed his arms and ran a hand over the back of his neck, uneasy. This wasn't going the way he imagined. What was meant to be a joke was now turning into a moment of silent tension. The laughter that had once echoed through the gym slowly faded away. The murmurs of the gym-goers were replaced by the sound of iron moving in the rock's hands and the steady rhythmic breathing he maintained with each repetition. It was impossible not to notice that his level was completely different from anyone else there. He wasn't just strong, he was experienced. Every muscle contraction was precise. Every movement demonstrated years of discipline and dedication. This wasn't the execution of a man trying to show off. This was the execution of a man who lived for this. Ryan took a deep breath and tried to regain his confidence. He couldn't allow the situation to slip out of his control. He turned to the gym, expecting to find allies to continue his joke. But instead, he saw serious, focused faces. The audience he wanted to entertain was now captivated by the rock. That irritated him even more. With a quick movement, he turned and pointed to the deadlift station in the corner of the gym. His goal was simple: to change the game. If the rock was strong with dumbbells, could he handle a real heavy lift? Ryan walked over to the Olympic barbell and, with theatrical exaggeration, began loading weights onto it. He made sure to put more weight than usual, hoping to intimidate his silent opponent. He wanted to see the rock hesitate. He wanted to see the first sign of failure. But what he didn't know was that he was about to witness something even more impressive. Ryan refused to accept what was happening. With every flawless repetition that the rock performed using the heaviest dumbbells in the gym, his control over the situation slipped through his fingers. He couldn't allow this. Not here, not in front of his students, not inside the gym where he was the center of attention. His mind started working rapidly, searching for a way to turn the game around. He needed a challenge where he could come out victorious. That was when his eyes locked onto the deadlift bar. That was where he could make a difference. Without wasting time, Ryan walked over to the deadlift area. Every step was calculated. He wanted everyone to see that he was still in control. With exaggerated movements, he began adjusting the weights on the bar, loading it with more weight than necessary. He deliberately picked the largest plates available, sliding them onto the bar one by one, letting them drop with force, making noise to draw attention. The gym was silent, but it was a silence filled with anticipation. The students who had been distracted were now completely focused on what was happening. There was something different in the air. An invisible tension filled the space. A silent battle for dominance was unfolding, but only one of the players seemed to understand it. Ryan was convinced that this was his moment. If the rock picked up that bar and failed, the entire impact of the last scene would be erased. He believed that he had finally found the right challenge. But what he didn't know was that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Without rushing, the rock placed the dumbbells back on the rack. Every movement was calm, controlled, as if he wasn't even remotely concerned about what was about to happen. Then, he walked toward the bar. The sound of his footsteps echoed on the gym floor, and the people around held their breath. Ryan maintained his confident posture, but something inside him started to waver. There was something about the way the rock moved that didn't match someone who was about to fail. He showed no uncertainty, He didn't even seem to question whether he could lift that weight. When he stopped in front of the bar, he didn't look at Ryan. He simply positioned his feet, adjusted his grip, and without hesitation, lifted the weight. The weight that was supposed to be a challenge rose from the floor as if it were nothing. No hesitation, no shaking arms, no extreme effort on his face. It was as if the weight itself didn't matter. The bar went up and down with surgical precision, as if it were being moved by a perfectly calibrated machine. Silence took over the gym. Ryan, who had once worn a smug grin, now watched in stunned silence. This was supposed to be the moment where he finally put the rock in his place. But instead, his own plan backfired. Every second that the rock held the bar at the top of the movement was a silent humiliation. And then, with the same ease with which he lifted the weight, he set it back down. No loud noise, no showboating, just pure mastery. The metallic sound of the plates touching the ground echoed through the space, but no one moved. The gym, once a place of constant competition, was now in complete silence. The clients who had laughed before now watched speechlessly. What was supposed to be a moment of humiliation for the rock became the exact opposite. And Ryan felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected the rock to simply accept the challenge and destroy any chance of a counterattack. The personal trainer took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure, but he was lost. He couldn't show that he had lost his edge in front of everyone. He needed to find a way out. That's when his eyes fell on the punching bag in the corner of the gym. Ryan straightened his shoulders and, in one last effort to reclaim control of the situation, started moving toward the punching bag. If the rock was strong, could he fight? Ryan wanted to change the setting. He wanted to place the rock in an arena where he could finally stand out. With a gesture, he pointed at the punching bag, suggesting that this would be the next challenge. It was his last card to play. The entire gym remained silent, waiting for the response. And the rock just gave a small smile. But it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. The real show was yet to come. The tension in the gym was almost palpable. The weight of the rock's last display of strength still hung in the air. The silence was absolute. Everyone had seen it. The perfect deadlift, the display of absolute control, the ease with which he dominated the situation without saying a single word. But Ryan couldn't accept it. His pride was wounded. His reputation, built on intimidation and showmanship, was beginning to crumble in front of his own students. He needed something, anything, to restore his image. That's when his eyes found the punching bag in the corner of the gym. This was his last card to play. If the rock was strong, was he also agile? Could he fight? With exaggerated gestures, Ryan stepped away from the weightlifting area and walked toward the punching bag. His shoulders were tense, his breathing heavier than usual. He tried to maintain a confident stance, but the rock's unwavering, focused gaze unsettled him. Reaching the bag, he grabbed it firmly with both hands and gave it a slight push, as if testing its resistance. The students around him began to realize what he was trying to do. The tension increased. It was a new challenge. He wanted to see if the rock, besides lifting weights, also knew how to fight. Without a hint of hesitation, the rock began walking slowly toward the punching bag. His steps were heavy, controlled, as if he were about to deliver the final lesson. With each step he took, Ryan felt his stomach churn. There was something terrifyingly calm about the way he moved. No rush, no provocation, just absolute confidence. When he stopped in front of the bag, he paused. Slowly, he clenched his fists, feeling the power within them. His knuckles cracked slightly as he adjusted his stance. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air. His eyes were locked onto the target. And then, the strike came. The first punch was dry, brutal, a direct and precise hit to the center of the punching bag. The sound echoed through the gym like thunder. The impact was so powerful that the chains holding the bag groaned violently, shaking the metal structure on the ceiling. Ryan instinctively took a step back. He knew the punch would be strong, but he hadn't expected this. Before he could even process what had just happened, The rock continued. No pause, no hesitation. He unleashed a devastating sequence of blows. His fists moved with lethal precision, each punch hitting the bag with incredible power and speed. The students who had been curious before were now completely mesmerized. It was like watching a scene from a movie, but this was real. The punching bag swayed as if it were made of paper. Each strike pushed the massive leather structure backward, as if the impact was strong enough to rip it from its support. The rock's movements were fast, fluid, calculated. He wasn't just throwing punches, he was demonstrating mastery. And then came phase 2. Without breaking rhythm, the rock started adding devastating kicks. His foot struck the bag with crushing power, making the chain on the ceiling vibrate with each impact. Ryan, now pale, felt sweat trickle down his neck. Every hit the rock landed was a silent statement. He didn't need words. He was showing beyond any doubt that he was a true warrior. And then came the final strike. The rock took a step back. His eyes were sharp, his breathing steady. He turned his body with surgical precision. And then, with frightening speed for someone his size, he delivered a devastating spinning kick. The impact was so absurdly powerful that the bag flew backward, nearly tearing the chain from its support. The sound that echoed through the gym was deafening. For a brief moment, no one moved. It was as if time had stopped. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. The man he had spent the last few minutes provoking wasn't just strong, he was a monster. He realized he had made the worst mistake possible. He had provoked the wrong man. And now, there was nothing left for him to do. The only sound remaining in the gym was Ryan's heavy breathing. He was completely speechless. The students around him looked at the rock with expressions of pure admiration. Ryan tried to open his mouth, tried to say something to salvage his dignity, but the words just wouldn't come. He knew. Everyone knew. The lesson had been delivered. And no one in that gym would ever forget what had just happened. The impact of the rock's last strike still lingered in the air like static electricity. The entire gym remained in absolute silence. No one dared to move. No one dared to break the moment. The punching bag was still swaying, the chain links creaking faintly as they settled after the devastating blow. The sound echoed through the space like the final remnants of a storm that had just passed. All eyes were fixed on just two people. The rock stood firm, breathing in a controlled manner, showing no arrogance or excessive satisfaction. His shoulders rose and fell slowly, his fists still clenched, but his gaze remained calm. He didn't look victorious. He looked like a teacher who had just delivered an important lesson. On the other side, Ryan stood frozen. His muscles were tense, but not from strength, from tension. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his eyes locked onto the ground as if he were trying to process everything that had just happened. The personal trainer who minutes ago exuded absolute confidence now seemed like a completely different man. His body, once carrying an air of superiority and control, now seemed small in the presence of the rock. He had lost, but not just physically. He had lost the psychological battle. He had lost in front of his own students, and worse, he had lost to a man who never even tried to compete. Ryan tried to avoid looking at the rock. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything to escape the situation. The students in the gym were all staring at him. But their looks were different now. Before, they saw him as the confident trainer, the example of strength and technique. Now they saw a man who had been completely dismantled. But the rock didn't take a single step back. He didn't walk away, didn't show disdain, didn't display superiority. He simply stood there unshaken. Ryan felt his throat go dry. He expected the rock to seize the moment, to say something humiliating, to make sure his defeat was reinforced. But that didn't happen. Instead, the rock took a step forward. The atmosphere in the gym shifted again. It wasn't an aggressive move. It was a gesture full of meaning. It was as if he was saying everything without saying a word. He wasn't there to put anyone down. He wasn't there to crush Ryan's pride. He was there to teach. For the first time that night, Ryan felt something different inside him. The anger and frustration that had been consuming him slowly faded, replaced by something else. Shame. but not a destructive shame. It was a shame that came with understanding, a shame that carried with it the realization that he had been acting the wrong way. At that moment, he understood the true meaning of strength. Strength wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about being the strongest in the room. It was about discipline. It was about respect. It was about knowing when to speak and when to let your actions speak for you. Ryan felt a massive weight lift off his shoulders. That gym, which for so long had been his domain of dominance, was now the place where he finally learned a true lesson in humility. And that lesson came from someone who never even tried to defeat him. The Rock didn't need to shout, he didn't need to humiliate, he simply was, and by being, he taught. Ryan finally lifted his gaze. And for the first time that night, he looked at the Rock with sincerity. No longer as a rival, no longer as someone who needed to be taken down, but as an example. Someone he respected. The trainer knew he had to do something. He couldn't just stand there in silence. He took a deep breath and in a small but meaningful gesture, slightly bowed his head, acknowledging what he had learned. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. And the Rock, without needing to say a word, understood. The cycle was complete. The lesson had been learned. And that day, no one in that gym would ever forget what they had witnessed. This story teaches us that true strength is not just in muscles, but in humility, respect, and discipline. Ego may make a man feel big, but only character can make him truly strong. The Rock didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He simply was who he always had been. And that was enough to teach a lesson that would last forever. If you believe character is more important than ego, leave a like. Comment on which part impacted you the most. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this. The Rock walked into that gym as just another man, but he walked out as a true example of strength and respect.